Welcome, Melinda. Melinda Leslie is a prominent, longtime researcher like myself, and I've asked her to join me today for two short interviews on two critically important subjects that I think she knows a lot about. And the first one I'd like to discuss with Melinda is the idea that some people have reported flying ships. There seems to be some sort of connection to experiencers being on the ship and consciousness. Can you maybe speak to that?
Yes, absolutely. First off, I mean, I know you're talking to other people that have also flown ships and interacted with the technology on board, and certainly I have in my own abduction experiences. For the people listening out there, I'm a lifelong abductee. I found out in 1989 and have continued to have ongoing experiences. I'm a typical abductee as far as, you know, my case is very similar to many, many other lifelong abductees. But yeah, I've sat at the controls. In my abductions, many things happen. Of course, the taking of ovum and eggs and production of hybrids. I've had all that. But I've also been shown quite a bit of technical information. It seems that when, I joke about this, but it seems like in my experiences, when I'm in an abduction and I'm having either a moment where I'm arguing with the ETs or telling them off or, you know, frightened or whatever, you know, whatever's going on. And it seems also whenever they do anything to me medically, a lot of times, I can't say every time, but a lot of times they followed up with showing me technology as both kind of, I think it's their way of saying thank you. They've learned that I like being shown the technology, and so that they go, oh, well, here, you know, thank you, show her some technology that'll make her happy, you know. And if I'm complaining or upset, it's like, quick, show her some technology that'll shut her up, you know. So it seems like I have that happen. And and also because I've been shown technology is why I seem to be of particular interest in the MILAB events, the military covert human experiences. They're interested in what, just like you're asking me now, they ask me, you know, about the technology. So but let's go to the flying of the craft stuff. And I've interviewed so many abductees. And as it came up in my MILAB research, and it turned out that the interest in the technology was one big component of the covert human interest in the abductees, it was constantly coming up that people, you know, I would ask them when I interview them, have you been shown technology? And of course they would say yes, you know, kind of like 8 out of 10 abductees would say that. And then they would go on to, I said, well, what do you know about the technology? And they said, well, it's all thought. It's all consciousness. It's all whatever you think the ship does. It's the propulsion's all consciousness. You know, they would share this with me consistently. And they said this was one factor that the covert human guys were very interested in. But first I'll start with my own experience. So I'm typical to those other cases. In a couple of my experiences, I've been sat at different controls. I've been shown what looks like, if you will, either a window or a screen with a scene of space on it. I was led to believe that I was seeing the ship propelling through space. Maybe, I don't know if I was or not. I don't know if it was a real image or not, but that's what they were showing me. And I'm sitting at like a control panel situation. I remember there, in a couple of experiences, there being like odd-shaped knobs or levers, or like or a touch screen situation, and there was this one particular experience where I remember feeling like I'm almost in a corridor area with this large wall or panel that looked like space. I'm told to do this. I'm told to touch it. I remember they're saying, you know, visualize where you want the ship to go. Maybe they showed me an image of where they wanted it to go. It was like, visualize it going there, and sense the movement of the ship, and it will respond to you. And as soon as I touched something, I felt response. Now, I don't know if I was actually maneuvering a ship, or if this was all some kind of simulation, you know, to appear that way. Like when you go through driver's training and you get in a simulation booth, or you get a little simulation thing. When I did it in high school, there was a little like steering wheel setup they gave you, you know, so maybe it's a simulation like that, but it was feel it, do this, it'll react, it'll respond, that kind of thing. And I've heard this from other people. Now, I've also been shown other types of technology on board, a variety of things. The thing that stands out the most was this particular image, this particular experience where I was shown a propulsion system, and it was like a cutaway, and at times I felt I was actually viewing into, like maybe they were projecting into my mind, viewing into the ship, and then part of it might have been some mock-up of, even though I'm on a bigger ship, that this is a smaller one, like a, and they said, this is not the propulsion of the ship you're in. This is like a smaller scout ship, but they tried to show me something small that I would understand. And they showed me this stacked, I understand it now, like capacitor I'm forgetting the terminology right now, but dielectric, capacitor, dielectric, you know, like a battery situation. And what they showed me, and it was these round plates that stacked up kind of on top of each other. There was wiring going down to them. Above them was a center area that was depressed with a disc that floated there. But I don't mean disc, not like a craft, but like there was like a mirrored concave surface that spun. Above that was a column that seemed to be somewhat suspended. It was encased, but they said there are versions where that's open, that energy, but in this case it was a column that, see if my hands show up here, you know, encased, and up at the top was a series of like an antenna array. And they showed me that when you see a typical UFO, as far as a disc with a dome on it and like an antenna sticking up, that's a common image, to see a little, you know, point or something sticking up, that they said that's attached to an antenna that picks up signals depending on where they're wanting it to go. And it's like, they literally explained it like tuning a radio, like this was almost like a radio tuner. They could tune into different frequencies and vibrations, everything from, you know, electromagnetic vibrations to literally a radio signal or a television signal. They could tune it into vibrational things like you know, some geo effect of the earth. They just needed to know the signature they were looking for, and once they could find it, they could dial it in, kind of get it strong. And what there was from this antenna system was a pole that came down into a column of energy. And they said that this magnetic field was creating like a plasma that this plate floated on. This concave surface was taking that energy, because it was spinning in concave, it was focusing it in and condensing it and focusing it up into the column. A pole came down the middle that I understood to be some kind of, you know, just metal, but it was tuning the frequency of the energy in that column, the plasma. The plasma in the column, they could tune to any external frequency, and then the magnetic plates at the bottom that were stacked with dielectric magnetic was was, I said battery, it's better to say it was a big magnet. What that did is it created a strong magnetic field. And then the shape of the craft, combined with the power column in the middle, created a toroidal or donut energy field around it. And I remember I was shown all this before, in a couple of abductions, before I ever heard Bob Lazar talk about a toroidal field and the folding of space-time. And everything he said in those initial, I go back to like that initial video of him, you know, a lot of people have seen it, that this matched what he said, you know, and except for he talked about the, you know, the different kind of generation system and the element 115 and all that, but that it created that toroidal field and that encased the craft in an envelope of energy. But like the donut, like the toroid, in the middle, see if people can see my hands, where my thumbs are going and my fingers, that in the middle there's where the column is. And all they have to do is match the stabilized energy in that column to any external source, and the interior then match the external by encasing the whole thing in its own levitating magnetic field, in other words, its own gravitational field. You match the inside to the external. It's like law of attraction, energy matching, just like how consciousness works, and boom, it went to that location. Wow. And depending on how much the increase was and how strong the magnetic field, the toroidal field that they created around it was, they could send something like instantaneously somewhere. And what they told me is in this small, and they said there's more complex systems, but they just were showing me something that they thought I would grasp from my limited understanding of physics and, you know, and consciousness and everything. So they were saying they just matched that outside area. And they said, if you stand in that column and you were to think that, now it would be dangerous to you, the energy, but they said your thought would draw you there. And so when they sat me at controls on, you know, on other experiences, they were saying, you know, think about where you're going. And it seemed like every thought, and as well as everything I touched, instantly the craft responded to that. And they would say, breathe deeply, remain calm, because any scattered thought would cause it to, you know, be wonky, you know. And so going back to when they showed me this generation of the gravitational system in this toroidal energy field, that the stacked magnetic plates below, that also, not only were they stacked, but they ran a current through them, and literally an electrical current, which was ran in cycles, so it would cause a spinning of the magnetic field. And then the plate floated in a plasma, strong electrical plasma, the plate would float on, and then that spinning plate would condense the energy. It was below the column. I now know it as a, well, I'm trying to remember the terminology. It's been so long since I've talked about this, but a concave, there's a name for it. I'll think of it in a second. But this concave plate condensed that energy above it. And then that energy, that strong plasma field that was condensed above this spinning circuit, above the spinning plate, by the fact it was concave, it was causing the energy to reflect and cancel in, not cancel, but build up on itself, creating a stronger plasma in the middle. And then all they needed to do was take this directional rod down in there, and the directional rod was hooked up to this, literally this tuning system, that all they had to know was what kind of energy they were trying to match, and or the frequency they were trying to match. Bring it down into that column. That whole column would match, and the ship would, like I said, like law of attraction, like the same vibrational frequency, that vibration would match, and boom, it would go there. And it was something I really appreciated being shown, and I was absolutely fascinated in, and I understood how it worked energetically to match a vibrational frequency, causing something to be drawn to something. And now through my metaphysical and spiritual practice, I understand it even better. You know, but it's so common that abductees are sat at controls and said, you have to think where you want the ship to go. You have to visualize it. You have to remote view where you want the ship to go. You use your emotions, you use your thoughts. I mean, everyone says this. Even people, even if they're not sat at the controls that they think is, you know, navigating a ship in some way, they're sat at something, you know, similar like a computer screen, and they get it to respond to them the same way. Often when they teach people languages or math on board, it's the same thing. It's you think and it interacts with it. That they know how they've mastered harnessing the frequency of the brain waves, and how things interact with that. I mean, we're now doing this in science. This is now commonplace. They now have pilots flying planes that have screens in their helmets and electrodes hooked up where if they think something, the plane responds. I mean, this is now being applied, and you know, in all sorts of advanced areas of technology, and in computers and AI, and you know, a bunch of different ways where I think this is being applied now. But abductees many years ago, you know, I mean, yeah, we started to hear about this more and more over the last 20 years, 10 years in technology, but abductees going back 40, 50, 60 years were saying, I was having this happen, you know, and having it respond to the thoughts, and having it respond to what I thought, and my eye movements and all those things, like I said, like fighter jet pilots are doing now. And
can I ask you, do you think this is a big part of what the beings are doing in terms of like why they would show you this? And because everybody, when you talk about the abduction experience, everybody always talks about the hybrid thing.
Yes, yes.
So what percentage would this be? Is this an important component?
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. First off, now I have to draw the line from what I think and my own personal conclusions versus just what research might show. I know that in the MILAB events, that in the interrogations and being questioned, this is all of great concern to those individuals, you know, the perpetrators of that. I know that abductees in their experiences have these kind of interactions. Of course, you know, it's been known for a long time, all the interaction with the aliens is telepathy. Yes, sometimes abductees speak out, get emotional, whether they scream or cry or laugh or just tell the aliens off or whatever, you know, they'll speak out, but all the responses are always telepathy. And often the abductees' responses are telepathy, particularly if they're calm and not getting emotional. So it's all telepathy. And then in the abductions, excuse me, in the hybrids, I meant to say, I feel, so again, this is more of a feeling, but it's based upon those things that we know combined with just a logical kind of conclusion, which is the hybrid children appear to be very advanced in intelligence, often psychically, high psi functioning capacity, and mental capacity, etc. And it could be that by introducing the alien DNA into the human race, because these hybrid children, first off, abductees have their DNA tweaked. Aside from having the children, they have their DNA messed with and tweaked. And then the hybrid children themselves, and more abductees feel that they are meeting their hybrid children in daily life situations. And this seems to be increasing. I'm hearing this more and more from people. And certainly the final work of the late Bud Hopkins, along with Dr. David Jacobs, was focusing on this, and abductees, hybrids living amongst us. And many of the abduction researchers now, Mary Rodwell comes to mind as someone who's clearly focusing on this. And so that there are these hybrid children being brought here to live. in abduction research, it's called the perfected hybrids. It doesn't mean they're in any way better. It just means for all intents and purposes, it is a human being that happens to have a lot of alien DNA or some portion of alien DNA. And the ones that wouldn't pass for human, are only seen on ship. But the ones that are just a human being that happen to have hybrid DNA are the ones being brought here. More and more abductees feel they're giving birth to hybrid children in life, like their children are partial hybrids. And then they're meeting their hybrid children that maybe previously they only saw on board ship or in environments with the ETs, and now they're meeting them in life. So it would stand to reason if these beings who are very advanced in intelligence, in psi functioning, in consciousness, functioning, if they're intermarrying, with the rest of the human race, that's going to cause a huge sea change. And I've been saying now for quite a while, I think that's very deliberate on the part of the ETs. I think before open contact and interaction as a normal part of daily society here on Earth can ever take place, I think they're needing to bring us up to speed to kind of have a level playing field with them. And I think the hybridization program is now demonstrating that that's a huge part of it, that it is to shift us in consciousness for that eventual day of interaction on a common basis. It's to kind of level that playing field and I don't think this isn't like something they're doing over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. I think this is something they've done over hundreds of years. And I think it's been on the increase for the last 100 years. And certainly in abduction research, it appears that there is, with the hybridization program, it's appearing like the beginnings of some kind of end game, which again is the hybrids being brought here, living with us, interbreeding, and it causes an exponential change. So it's one thing just to take the abductee and tweak them. It's next thing to create hybrids, and the abductee and the hybrid are then breeding, and how many generations do you have to go before there's a complete change? And probably not very far.
How many have you experienced yourself increased psi abilities? You'll always hear this because of your abduction experiences, that you have talents that the normal person doesn't have.
Yeah, it's kind of a joke amongst the abductees. Which came first, the psychic or the abductee? Is it a byproduct of the experience, or is it one of the reasons you were chosen? Well, we know now in spades in abduction research that abductions go back in families, okay? Go back multi-generational. So they're following a genetic lineage. Again, see, that would be part of this program to create this change, and create this genetic change in us that, again, I'm saying is very much about consciousness, that it is about increasing our consciousness, our ability to interact with them, and to eventually get into a, galactic society. Okay, so, well, we are, but to get into it in a more open way, a post-disclosure period, obviously. So, what was your question again? I think I lost track of it there.
Your own psychic abilities, or your talents that you've got that other people wouldn't have. Yeah,
well, everybody is intuitive. Everybody has some amount of intuitive ability. It's how we function as human beings. It's how we've evolved. It's meant to be for our evolution and for protection, and interacting with each other. So I think there's a natural evolution process there, and everyone has it. Everyone can learn to play the piano. Everyone has the capacity to possibly learn that, or most people, some people have a capacity to learn that. Not everyone's going to be a concert pianist. Well, same with advanced psi functioning. It's a function, it's a talent, it's a part of the brain, and you can develop it. And some people, just like some people are born natural piano players, you know, some people are born natural psychic adepts and have paranormal functioning in a variety of ways, or maybe just one way that's strong, you know. I had some my whole life, and I've learned how to increase that. But going back, in more specific answer to your question is yes. In my abductions, I feel that that has been absolutely enhanced. I have abductions where they have tested those abilities, requested me to perform things and do them repeatedly and give me pointers on how to do it better, you know. So I've had that happen in my abductions. So in my case, I can say, was it there my whole life? Yes. Was it increased from my abductions? Absolutely.